Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is singing the wrong words to their favorite song, with total, unshakable confidence. Not because they weren't listening, because their brain lied to them. In 1954, a writer named Sylvia Wright confessed in Harper's Magazine that for years, as a child, she had misheard a line from an old Scottish ballad, and she wasn't alone. Scientists would later prove that this isn't a memory problem. It's a wiring problem, built into every human brain on Earth. Before this video ends, you'll understand why your ears have been quietly editing reality since the day you were born, and why two people can hear the exact same sound and swear they heard two completely different words. Subscribe now, because what you're about to learn will change how you listen for the rest of your life. Sound feels simple. A wave hits your eardrum. Your brain decodes it. You understand a word. But that's not what actually happens. Your brain doesn't wait for sound to finish before deciding what it means. It predicts, fills gaps, and sometimes overwrites what your ears actually received. Researchers in cognitive psychology have documented this phenomenon for decades under a specific name, the mondegreen, a misheard lyric or phrase that gets replaced with something that sounds similar, but means something entirely different. The term itself was born from a mishearing. Sylvia Wright had misheard a line about a slain nobleman, turning it into a phrase about a woman named Lady Mondegreen, who never existed. Linguists studied the pattern and found it wasn't random. Mishearings cluster around the same acoustic weak points, the same syllables, the same blurred consonants, across millions of listeners, in dozens of languages, worldwide. Here's the truth that surprises most people. Your brain isn't a microphone. It's an editor. When sound reaches your ear, the signal is incomplete, noisy, and ambiguous by nature, especially in music, where instruments overlap vocals and diction gets stretched across melody. Your brain doesn't tolerate ambiguity well, so it does something remarkable. It searches your existing vocabulary for the closest, most familiar match, and substitutes it in, often without you ever noticing the swap happened. This is why children mishear national anthems into nonsense phrases about bears and geese. This is why English speakers across generations have confidently sung entirely wrong lyrics to iconic rock songs for over 50 years, never once doubting themselves, because the substituted words made just enough sense to feel true. Audio researchers call this top-down processing, where prior knowledge shapes perception before conscious reasoning even begins. It's the same mechanism that lets you understand mumbled speech in a loud restaurant. The system that helps you survive noisy environments is the exact same system that quietly rewrites your favorite songs. For most of history, no one studied this seriously. A wrong lyric was dismissed as a joke, a child's error, a funny story told at dinner. Sound itself was assumed to be objective. You either heard it correctly, or you were careless. Even into the early 20th century, hearing and speech perception were treated as passive processes. The ear receives, the brain records. End of story. Formal linguistics focused on how language was produced, not how it could be misperceived at scale. Music radio in the 1960s and 70s only accelerated the problem. Songs blasted through cheap AM transistor speakers, vocals buried under distortion, lyrics rarely printed anywhere for verification. Listeners had no reference point except their own best guess, and their brains, unknowingly, were guessing constantly, filling silence with meaning, turning static and mumbled syllables into full, confident sentences that felt completely real. The turning point came from an unexpected direction: cognitive science, not music. In 1976, psychologists Harry MacGurk and John MacDonald published a study that would upend how researchers understood hearing itself. They discovered that what people see can override what they hear. In their experiment, subjects watched a video of a mouth forming one sound, while a completely different sound played through the audio. The results stunned the research team. People didn't hear the actual audio. They heard a third blended sound, one that didn't even exist in the original recording. It was later named the MacGurk effect, and it proved something unsettling. Hearing isn't purely auditory. It's a construction, built partly from sound and partly from expectation, memory, and visual context. A discovery that reframed mishearing not as a flaw, but as a fundamental feature of the human brain. If you've made it this far, you're the kind of person who actually wants to understand how your own mind works. So, hit subscribe now, because the next section reveals the moment scientists proved this happening to millions of people in real time. Not everyone accepted these findings easily. For years after the McGurk effect was published, some researchers in traditional linguistics resisted the implications, arguing that speech perception errors were simply due to poor audio quality or inattentive listeners, not a built-in feature of cognition. The debate simmered quietly in academic journals throughout the 1980s and 90s, largely unnoticed by the public, as hearings were still treated as trivia, not science. That began to shift when audiologists and psycholinguists started documenting mondegreens systematically, cataloging thousands of examples across English, Spanish, French, and Mandarin, and finding the same underlying pattern everywhere. Ambiguous phonemes, filled by cultural familiarity, produced eerily consistent wrong answers across unrelated listeners who had never spoken to each other. The evidence became too consistent to dismiss. What once seemed like isolated, funny mistakes was, in fact, a measurable, repeatable property of human hearing itself, hiding in plain sight in nearly every song, speech, and conversation ever recorded. Then, in May 2018, the phenomenon exploded into public view in a way no laboratory experiment ever could. A short, degraded audio clip, just a single computer-generated word, was uploaded online, and almost overnight it split the internet into two camps who could not agree on what they were hearing. Some swore, with total certainty, that the recording said one name. Others, listening to the exact same file, heard a completely different name. It became known as the Yanny versus Laurel phenomenon, and within days it had been discussed by major news outlets, debated by linguists on live television, and analyzed by audio engineers who broke the clip down frequency by frequency. What they found was extraordinary. The original recording actually contained overlapping sound frequencies, remnants of both possible words layered together in the same audio file. Depending on the exact hardware playing it back, the age of the listener's ears, and even the specific frequencies that person's hearing was naturally more sensitive to, their brain would lock onto one interpretation and discard the other entirely, not as a guess, but as a full, vivid, undeniable perception. Researchers at institutions, including the University of California and audio scientists writing for outlets like the New York Times, explained that higher frequency-sensitive listeners tended to hear one word, while those more attuned to lower frequencies heard the other. And crucially, some listeners could be made to hear the opposite word simply by adjusting the pitch of the same identical recording. For a brief, strange week, millions of people experienced firsthand what researchers had been documenting quietly for decades: that hearing is not a passive act of receiving sound, but an active personal act of construction. Amid the arguments and internet memes, there was something unexpectedly human in it too. Strangers messaging each other audio clips at 2 a.m., genuinely bewildered, laughing, occasionally frustrated, trying to prove to a friend or a parent that what they heard was real. Behind the viral joke was a quiet, sincere human need to be believed, to know that your own senses hadn't betrayed you. Audio engineers later confirmed there was no correct answer, only a spectrum of biologically valid ones, a discovery that, for many people, was the first time they ever doubted their own ears. In the years since, the Yanny Laurel event has become one of the most cited real-world demonstrations of auditory perception ever recorded, referenced in psychology courses, audiology training, and cognitive science lectures around the world. It gave mondegreens, once dismissed as harmless trivia, a scientific spotlight they had never received before. Music streaming platforms now routinely publish official lyrics precisely because so many listeners, for generations, had confidently sung something the artist never wrote. Audiologists use the phenomenon to help patients understand hearing loss and frequency sensitivity in accessible, relatable terms. What started as one writer's confession about a misheard folk ballad in 1954 has become a documented, peer-reviewed window into how every human brain constructs the world it perceives, not passively, but actively, imperfectly, and personally. Every single time sound reaches an ear, So here's the question worth sitting with. If your brain has been quietly rewriting sound your entire life, smoothing over static, guessing at blurred syllables, filling silence with meaning, how much of what you're certain you heard today was actually said, not just in songs, in conversations, in arguments, in memories you'd swear were accurate? If two people can listen to the identical recording and hear two entirely different words, both feeling completely certain, what does that tell us about the reliability of our own memory of everything else? Tell us in the comments. What's a lyric or phrase you were absolutely certain of, until you found out you'd been hearing it wrong your entire life? And if this made you question your own ears, subscribe. Because next time, we're going deeper into the science of perception and what else your brain has been quietly hiding from you.